Have you ever really thought about what's going on inside your knee when you just take a single step? It feels like a pretty simple hinge, right? But what if I told you it's actually one of the most complex, high-pressure systems in your entire body? Seriously, it's a total marvel of engineering. And today we're going to unpack the incredible physics that make it all work, and what happens when that system starts to break down.
So let me ask you a question. What's the single hardest working bone in your body that you probably never ever think about? I'll give you a hint. It's not the massive femur in your thigh, and it's not the protective dome of your skull. It's actually a small, kind of floating bone right at the very front of your knee. That's right, it's your kneecap, or as it's officially known, the patella. And what is just absolutely mind-blowing is the sheer force this little bone can handle. During a deep squat, the joint it forms with your thigh bone can be hit with forces up to 4,000 pounds. To put that in perspective, for a 200-pound person, that is 20 times their body weight. Just incredible.
So how on earth does this small bone handle such immense pressure? Well, it turns out it has a secret job that goes way, way beyond just being a bony shield for your knee.
It all comes down to some really basic physics. You see, the patella provides this huge mechanical advantage because it acts just like a pulley. It actually lifts the quadriceps tendon away from the knee's center of rotation. And that simple shift, it dramatically increases your leverage, which means your quad muscle doesn't have to work anywhere near as hard to straighten your leg. To put it really simply, without that little pulley, you'd need a superhuman amount of force just to stand up from a chair. And we know this because patients who have had their patella surgically removed find it incredibly difficult to extend their knee, all because they've lost that absolutely crucial biomechanical advantage.
Okay, so we know the kneecap is a force multiplier. Now let's get into the real nitty-gritty, the core physics of how this joint manages those incredible forces. It's this delicate balance, and it's all governed by a few key principles.
The health and function of this whole system really boils down to 3 key variables. And trust me, understanding these is the secret to unlocking both peak performance and, freedom from pain.
All right, first up is contact area. Think of it like this: a snowshoe versus a stiletto heel in the snow. The snowshoe spreads your weight out over a big area, so you just float on top. The stiletto concentrates all that force into one tiny point, and you sink right in. Well, your kneecap is smart. As your knee bends deeper and deeper, the contact area on the back of it actually triples in size, distributing all that immense pressure, just like a snowshoe.
Next, we've got the joint reaction force. This is basically the total compressive force that's squishing the patella against the femur. As your knee bends deeper, the angle between the 2 big tendons attached to it gets sharper and sharper, and this creates a much stronger compressive force, essentially jamming the kneecap right into the thigh bone.
And finally, we have the Q angle. Now you can think of this as the angle of attack. It's how we measure how well your kneecap is tracking in the little groove on your femur. It's the angle formed by a line from your hip to your kneecap and another line from your kneecap down to your shin.
So what happens when that angle is off? Well, the research is crystal clear on this. If that Q angle is too big, it can pull the patella sideways, creating these uneven pressure hotspots. This dramatically increases the risk of dislocation, and it's a primary cause of that really common pain people get right at the front of the knee.
Okay, so when you put all these physics principles together, you get some truly staggering numbers. This table lays it all out for a 200-pound person. Look at this. Just walking is half your body weight. Going downstairs is 5 times. And a deep squat, a full 20 times your body weight, hitting that 4,000-pound mark we talked about. It's just wild.
So why does all this physics matter? I mean, who cares, right? Well, you should, because understanding this stuff is the absolute key to exercising smarter and safer, especially if you're dealing with any kind of knee pain.
And it all comes down to understanding 2 fundamental types of exercises. You've got open chain exercises, like a leg extension machine, where your foot is just free in the air, and then you have closed chain exercises, like a squat, where your foot is planted on the ground. Now here's the crucial point. They stress the knee at opposite ends of the motion. Open chain is hardest when your leg is almost straight, and closed chain is hardest when your knee is bent really deep.
And this knowledge gives us a perfect roadmap for safe rehab. As you can see here, for open chain knee extensions, we can work in that 90 to 40 degree range to avoid the really high stress zone near the top. And for closed chain stuff like squats, we can start in the shallow 0 to 30 degree range where the forces are lowest and then slowly and safely progress deeper from there.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. As physical therapist Mike Reinold puts it, it's not about one type of exercise being better than the other. The real key is using both, but being smart about it, doing them within these safe, evidence-based ranges of motion to get the best results without making things worse.
But what happens when the knee's mechanics are so messed up that exercise just isn't going to cut it? Well, that's when we have to start looking at surgical solutions.
We're going to look at two really different problems here. First, there's chronic instability, where the kneecap is just constantly dislocating. And then second, an acute fracture, where the kneecap itself actually breaks.
Now for that chronic instability, the problem often comes down to a torn ligament called the medial patellofemoral ligament, or MPFL. You can think of it as the main tether that keeps the kneecap from sliding off to the side. To find the absolute best way to fix this, researchers did this massive review. They started with over 500 studies and basically distilled them down to just the 29 most high-quality ones to find the real answer.
And what they found was overwhelmingly positive. Reconstructing that ligament is incredibly effective. It restores that main stabilizer, it drops the rate of redislocation to below 5%, and it leads to excellent functional scores and patient satisfaction rates of over 90%. For these patients, it is a true game changer.
Okay, now for a totally different situation, a broken kneecap. For years, the gold standard fix has been a kind of figure-of-8 wire, but it has a huge problem, the complication rate. We're talking chronic pain, hardware irritation, the fix just plain failing can be over 50%. That's a coin flip.
So researchers used these powerful computer models to figure out why. And this slide shows the difference so clearly. On the left, you see the stress pattern on the bone with that traditional wire fix. See how it's all fragmented and irregular? Now look at the right. That's a modern locking plate. Notice how the stress pattern becomes way more uniform, almost perfectly heart-shaped.
And that's really the crucial point here. The old-school wire creates this unnatural, fragmented stress pattern. But the modern plate, it creates a stress pattern that is much, much closer to a normal, healthy knee. And this could be the key to preserving the joint's natural mechanics and ultimately leading to way better outcomes with fewer complications down the road.
So this all brings us to one last big question. We've seen the incredible, almost unbelievable forces our knees are built to handle. So what's the big takeaway? Should we be avoiding high-stress movements like deep squats to protect them? Or should we be intelligently training our bodies, building the strength and resilience needed to not just handle those forces, but to actually thrive on them? That's definitely something to think about.